back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. After 5 months out of the game, the Boyle is back with 2 gigs in 2 nights, and it felt fucking good. It felt fucking good. I forgot how good it feels doing stand-up comedy. When you're laying around being a lazy piece of shit for 5 months, although it wasn't like there were gigs on and I wasn't going to them, but I was still in the back of my mind, I was like, ugh, do I really want to go out there and do stand-up to some uninterested cunts? So I wasn't really bursting with enthusiasm, especially that first night. The first night, the Friday night, the gig at the tattoo studio in my fucking socks. I can tell you right now, before I went on, I wasn't like, this is what it's all about. It's great to be back. Standing out the front there before I went in, I was like 90%. Just jump in a fucking tuk-tuk and bail. Just forget you ever did stand-up comedy and just fucking bail. But I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't because I had a fucking good time. So that first night, the Friday night at the tattoo studio in my socks, I was doing 8 minutes and I had nothing prepared. I had no jokes prepared at all. I was like, fuck it, just go up and riff for a bit. You haven't done a gig in 5 months. If you go up there and try and fucking do jokes, you're going to be stuttering, trying to remember jokes you haven't done before. It's going to be a jolty, fucking shitty set. So I was like, just go up there, have fun, shit on Indians. That's always the go-to, just shit on Indians. It's like this podcast, really. So yeah, instead of doing jokes, fumbling around, trying to hit punchlines and that sort of shit, I just went up there and riffed. And that's kind of what you want to do in a small crowd like that anyway. It was like 15 people. And they were all fucking chicks too. But it was fun. So I went up there and I basically did a podcast to them. I did a live podcast to the Indians' faces. I sort of want to do that with my stand-up now. I have about 30% of it just riffing off the cuff shit and then like lead into bits and stuff like that. The only problem with that is it takes years of eating shit to get to the point where you're riffing good. But anyway, I had a fucking good set in my socks at the tattoo studio. It wasn't all good, actually. There was some fucking real flat spots. No, there was really one big flat spot. I'd been talking about all the people we knew who died of COVID-19 in India. And then I sort of went to the audience and I'm like, everyone knows someone who passed away, yeah? And I'm like, there was always 2 questions I asked when I found out someone had just passed away. You know what those questions are, don't you? And I fucking pointed at some bitch in the crowd and she's like, no. And I'm like, how old were they? And were they fat? And all the girls in the front row just sat there shaking their heads. The whole fucking tattoo parlor was just silent. Even the comics were like, what? You couldn't even hear the buzz of a needle. That one did not go down well. There was a few fatties in the crowd, let's be honest. There was a few fatties, and I think Indians have a little bit more of a heart than I do. How old were they, and were they fat? I thought that was universal if you found out someone died of COVID. Or do they have diabetes? But if they have diabetes, that sort of implies they were fat and possibly old. But I recovered from that, and I kept on riffing for a bit, got some good laughs. And then at about the 6-minute mark, I was starting to run out of steam. So I'm like, fuck it, just quit while you're ahead, Boyle. Otherwise, you're going to say some other nasty shit and it could turn bad. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm out of here. Thanks, blah, blah, blah. And I got off stage and it was fucking sweet, high as fuck. So some other comedian who was running a room was also there. And he's like, do you want to jump up at my room tomorrow night? I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. Ended up going out and hanging with these comedians, smoking like fucking 50 darts. I'm back on the darts whenever I go to comedy now. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I've been smashing the darts on the weekends. It's almost impossible to hang out with comedians without drinking and smoking. You got to do one. Otherwise, what are you there for? So that was cool, just hanging out with the Indian comics and them just bitching about the same shit we bitch about in Melbourne. It's exactly the same. Every single shitty comedy scene in the entire world is exactly the same. It's just comedians bitching about each other individually and as like cliques, and every comedian thinking they are possibly the greatest comedian of all time. That's about it. So the next day I listened to my set back, and it was a sloppy set because I was just fucking riffing. But there was the embryo of some good shit in there. There was the beginning of a good Indian set. I think what I'm going to do is this show that I'm going to fucking write for India, I think I'm going to call it Stranded. Because basically what the Indian audience wants to know is, why the fuck is he here? What the fuck is he doing here? So I can put together an easy 5-10 minutes just about that. Then I can move into like living with the Indian family and all this sort of shit. It's going to be a very Indian show. But the embryo of the set is there. So the next night I did a gig at a place called Drunkling. And this place was cool. There was about 20 people, maybe a few more out on the balcony and shit like that. There was a stage. The microphone worked well. There were lights. It was like I was doing an actual comedy gig. It was fucking great. And I just did the same thing again. I just went up there. I just riffed. I shat on Indians. I talked about Slumdog Millionaire being a fucking documentary, not a movie. It went well again. Still a bit sloppy. It wasn't tight. But now I think I can do it. Now I think I can put together a 45 minutes to an hour with the material I've already got, plus a little bit of COVID shit, plus a little bit of just pure shitting on Indians, plus family shit. I think I can fucking do it and sell some fucking tickets. I'm back, baby. I'm a fucking comedian again. So after that Drunklings gig, I went out and hung with the comedians again, chowing down the darts. And I tell you what, I was sitting there at the table with these fucking comedians, and I was just drinking water, but the waiters were coming over and just putting down fucking beers everywhere. And they put a beer, just a fresh, nice, cold, fucking long neck beer in front of me. And my water was directly behind the beer, and I'm just sitting there. And every time I go to look at my water, the beer, the shiny, glistening fucking beer's there. And it was hard to resist. My reflex every single time was to pick up the fucking beer. Every single time. I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't drink. And then I'd get my water, have a drink of the water, put it next to the beer. And the next time I went to take a fucking sip of water, I went for the beer again. I'm like, fucking hell. So it's all still in there. I had to remind myself like 8 times I don't drink. Anyway, it is good to be a comedian again. When I start getting this material together, I'll start putting some on the podcast. It doesn't really matter if I burn the Indian material, so I'll fucking just chuck it up. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Hit me up on social media. I'm Boyle Comedy on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and I'll see you the fuck later.